The distant star systems of Galaxia's edge had always been a place of wonder and diversity. Thousands of species from hundreds of planets had built thriving communities along this cosmic frontier, establishing trade routes, cultural exchanges, and a delicate political balance known as the Border Systems Alliance. Yet beneath the veneer of peaceful cooperation, fear lingered in the hearts of every inhabitant, fear of the day the invasion fleet would arrive. Colonel Lara Min stood at the observation deck of Horizon Gate, the Alliance's foremost command station, watching the distant stars with troubled eyes. At 43, she had spent her entire adult life in military service, rising through the ranks with a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering determination. Her slender frame belied her strength, and the silver threads beginning to appear in her dark hair only added to her commanding presence. "Status report," she said without turning. Lieutenant Commander Vex, her operations officer, approached with a datapad. "Border patrols report another probe disappeared near the Cassini Drift. That's the third this month." Lara's jaw tightened. The year 3247 had begun with unsettling patterns, mysterious energy signatures, vanishing scout ships, and garbled transmissions from the void beyond known space. Intelligence suggested they were dealing with reconnaissance attacks from an alien entity, but hard evidence remained frustratingly elusive. "Increase surveillance in the sector," she ordered, "and schedule a briefing with the Alliance Council. They need to understand we're running out of time." "Yes, Colonel." Vex hesitated. "There's something else." The astrophysics team detected an unusual gravitational anomaly. It appeared briefly, then vanished. But it matched none of our known signatures. Lara finally turned, her dark eyes focused and alert. "The Outway fleet? Possibly, or something worse." She nodded grimly. "Inform all stations. Readiness level Alpha." As Vex departed, Lara returned her gaze to the stars. The Alliance had heard rumors of the Outway fleet for decades, an unstoppable armada of alien vessels that conquered everything in their path, leaving no survivors and no witnesses. Many dismissed it as a spacer's tale, but Lara had studied enough history to know that the most terrifying legends often contained kernels of terrible truth. What she couldn't possibly know was that humanity's salvation would come not from their impressive arsenal or tactical genius, but from something as simple and ancient as the aroma of freshly baked bread. The klaxons began wailing at precisely 0347 hours, jolting Lara from a fitful sleep. She was fully dressed and rushing toward the command center within 90 seconds, adrenaline clearing the fog from her mind as she assimilated the chaos unfolding around her. "Report!" she barked as she entered the command center. General Thaxon, a reptilian saurian with scales that shimmered in the emergency lighting, turned to her with uncharacteristic alarm in his usually impassive eyes. "They're here, Colonel. The outer defense grid has been breached." The main display activated, showing a formation of massive vessels unlike anything Lara had ever seen. They moved with impossible precision, their hulls absorbing weapons fire without visible damage. The Alliance's first line of defense, a network of automated plasma cannons and gravitational mines, was being systematically destroyed. "Evacuation status?" she asked, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Civilian transports are launching from all major settlements," Communications Officer Yara reported. "Estimated 30% evacuated so far." Lara studied the tactical display, noting the methodical advance of the alien fleet. They weren't rushing, which meant they were confident, or perhaps simply unstoppable. "Deploy the Thunderhead squadrons," she ordered. "Full counter-offensive pattern, and prepare the Singularity weapon." The room fell silent. The Singularity was the Alliance's last resort weapon, capable of creating a localized black hole. Its deployment had been authorized only once in the past century, and the ethical implications were staggering. "Colonel," General Thaxon said quietly, "the Singularity could destabilize the entire sector." "And if the Outway fleet breaks through," Lara countered, "we've seen what happens to conquered worlds." Before anyone could respond, a young ensign called out from the sensor station. "Colonel, We're detecting something unusual from the lead vessel. Weapons signature? No, ma'am, it's... The ensign frowned, adjusting his instruments. This can't be right. It's registering as... Bread. Bread, Lara repeated incredulously. Yes, ma'am. The spectral analysis shows compounds consistent with baked grain products. And there's a distinct thermal pattern similar to... An oven, finished Lieutenant Rico, a young pilot who had joined the command staff only months earlier. Her eyes widened. It smells like bread. They're baking bread. For a moment, the absurdity of the statement hung in the air. Then reality reasserted itself as another defensive station exploded under the Outway fleet's attack. I don't care if they're running a 5-star restaurant, Lara said sharply. They've destroyed 3 outposts and killed hundreds of Alliance personnel. Launch the Thunderheads, now! As the elite fighter squadrons engaged the alien vessels, Lara called for an emergency strategy session. This development, bizarre as it seemed, might provide insight into their enemy, and in warfare. Understanding your opponent was often the difference between victory and defeat. Within the hour, she had assembled an unusual team in the station's tactical room. Her military advisors, alongside Oren, the station's head chef, and Dr. Elena Quinn, the Alliance's leading food scientist. You're telling me, Oren said, stroking his bushy mustache, that while blasting our defenses to atoms, these aliens are baking bread? Dr. Quinn adjusted her spectacles thoughtfully. The spectral analysis is fascinating. If I'm reading this correctly, the molecular composition suggests something similar to sourdough, but with compounds I've never encountered before. Is it a weapon? General Thaxton asked. Some form of biological or chemical agent disguised as food? Unlikely, Dr. Quinn replied. The thermal signatures and chemical reactions are consistent with actual baking processes. They're literally heating flour, water, and leavening agents. Lara paced the room, considering the implications. Could it be cultural, a ritual before battle? Or maybe, Oren suggested, his eyes lighting up, it's their version of comfort food, something familiar before facing the unknown. As they debated, the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. The Thunderhead squadrons fought valiantly, but their weapons barely scratched the alien vessels. 3 more defensive platforms fell, and the Outway fleet pressed inexorably toward Horizon Gate. We need more information. Lara decided, I want a covert team to infiltrate one of those vessels. If there's any weakness to be found, technological or psychological, we need to discover it. With respect, Colonel, General Thaxton objected. Sending personnel aboard an Outway vessel is a suicide mission. Not necessarily, interrupted a new voice. Everyone turned to see a slight figure standing in the doorway, Rico, the young pilot who had first identified the bread scent. The smaller scout ships might be able to approach undetected while their main weapons are engaged with our defenses. Lara studied the young officer thoughtfully. You're volunteering, Lieutenant. Rico nodded, her expression determined despite the fear evident in her eyes. I've logged more stealth missions than anyone in the fleet, Colonel. And I've got the best nose in the quadrant. If anyone can track down that bread, it's me. Against her better judgment, Lara approved the mission. As the hours passed and the Outway fleet drew nearer, she deployed every weapon in the Alliance's arsenal, antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, gravity lances, all to minimal effect. The aliens responded with devastating precision, their technology so advanced it bordered on the magical. Just as Lara was preparing to order the Singularity weapon armed, a crackling transmission came through from Rico's scout ship. Colonel Min, the pilot's voice came through, breathless with excitement and disbelief. You're not going to believe what I found. Report, Lieutenant. It's not weapons, ma'am. It's bakeries. Massive industrial-scale bakeries. They have entire decks dedicated to growing grain, milling flour, and baking bread. Hundreds of different varieties. Lara exchanged baffled glances with her staff. Are you certain? Positive. Colonel, I managed to infiltrate through a maintenance hatch. Their security is entirely focused outward. They never expected anyone to get inside. And there's something else. Go on. The aliens, they're affected by the bread somehow. I noticed it when I was hiding in one of the ventilation shafts. The smell was overwhelming, and when it circulated through their living quarters, they would stop whatever they were doing. It was like they entered a trance state. Dr. Quinn leaned forward, her scientific curiosity piqued. Any physiological changes you could observe? Their skin, or exoskeleton, I guess, changed color slightly. And they made these humming sounds, almost like they were remembering something. Lara's mind raced, connecting disparate pieces of information. Lieutenant, did you manage to secure a sample? Better than that, Colonel, I downloaded their recipes. For the first time since the crisis began, a flicker of hope kindled in Lara's chest. It wasn't much, perhaps nothing more than a cultural curiosity. But it was the first potential vulnerability they had identified in an otherwise invincible enemy. Return immediately, Lieutenant. We need to analyze this information. As Rico's scout ship made its perilous journey back to Horizon Gate, Lara convened another strategy session, this time including the station's entire culinary and scientific staff. If we're understanding this correctly, Oren said, reviewing the downloaded recipes, bread isn't just food to them, it's something fundamental, almost sacred. Dr. Quinn nodded, her fingers dancing across a molecular modeling display. The chemical compounds in these recipes interact with their neurological systems in fascinating ways. It's not just nutrition, it's memory, emotion, perhaps even identity. And yet they're conquering and destroying worlds. General Thaxton pointed out. How does that reconcile with a species that reveres bread, a fundamentally agricultural, peaceful pursuit? Unless, Lara suggested, a theory forming in her mind. They've lost something. What if the bread making is a fragment of cultural memory, but they've forgotten its significance? The room fell silent as they contemplated this possibility. If true, it might explain the contradiction between the Outway fleet's ruthless military efficiency and their curious baking obsession. We need to test this theory, Lara decided. Chef Oren, can you reproduce these recipes? The chef studied the alien formulations, his brow furrowed. Some of the ingredients are unknown, but I can approximate most of them. It won't be exact, but... It doesn't need to be exact, Lara interrupted. It needs to be authentic, real bread made by hand, not by machines. That I can do, Oren said with growing excitement. My grandmother's sourdough starter is over 100 years old, passed down through generations. If anything can trigger memories of home and hearth, it's that. As preparations began for what Lara privately termed Operation Breaking Bread, the military situation grew increasingly desperate. The Outway fleet had pushed through the last defensive line and was now positioned to strike directly at Horizon Gate. The civilian evacuation was only 70% complete, and time was running out. In the station's kitchens, now transformed into a strategic command post, Oren worked feverishly with his team, kneading dough, monitoring fermentation, and adjusting temperatures. Dr. Quinn had converted part of her laboratory into a makeshift bakery, testing variations that might maximize the neurological impact on the alien physiology. This is madness, General Thaxton muttered as he watched flour dust settle on tactical displays. The greatest military threat in our history, and we're responding with baguettes. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are the most unexpected ones, Lara replied, though she shared his doubts. She had staked everything on this gamble, postponing the Singularity weapons deployment and holding their remaining military assets in reserve. When the first loaves emerged from the ovens, their golden brown crusts gleaming and the intoxicating aroma filling the air, even the skeptical general fell silent. There was something primal and comforting about freshly baked bread, a connection to home and safety that transcended species and cultures. Now we need a delivery system, Lara said, returning to tactical thinking. Something that will disperse the aroma where it will have maximum impact. The environmental systems, suggested Rico, who had returned safely from her mission and joined the planning team. If we can introduce the bread scent into their ventilation, Based on what I observed, it might disrupt their combat effectiveness. But how do we get close enough? Dr. Quinn asked. Their defensive systems would vaporize any approaching vessel. Lara studied the tactical display, noting the position of the Outway fleet relative to a nearby asteroid belt, the same area that spacers had nicknamed the Bread Ring due to its distinctive shape. We don't approach them, she said slowly. We make them come to us. The plan that emerged was audacious to the point of insanity. They would position a small, heavily shielded vessel in the Bread Ring, equipped with the most powerful atmospheric projectors available. Inside, Orin would bake bread continuously, while the projectors amplified and directed the aroma toward the Outway fleet. It's the cosmic equivalent of leaving a plate of cookies to lure someone into a trap, Orin said with a chuckle. Except we're not trying to trap them, Laura corrected. We're trying to remind them of something they've forgotten. As the preparations neared completion, Laura received word that the Outway fleet had altered course. Rather than pressing their advantage against Horizon Gate, they had paused, as if confused or uncertain. They've detected something, Rico reported. Their formation is shifting. The bread? Laura asked hopefully. Impossible to confirm, but their sensors are definitely focused on the Bread Ring. It was time. Laura made the difficult decision to lead the mission herself, selecting a small team that included Orin, Dr. Quinn, and Rico. If this failed, at least she would be there to give the final order for the Singularity weapon. The journey to the Bread Ring was tense but uneventful. The modified vessel, little more than a mobile bakery with shields and minimal propulsion, took position among the asteroids. Its environmental projectors ready. Begin baking, Laura ordered once they were in position. Orin needed no further encouragement. With practiced hands, he shaped loaves of various styles, crusty baguettes, plump boules, delicate flatbreads, all based on the alien recipes but infused with his grandmother's sourdough starter. As each batch entered the ovens, Dr. Quinn monitored the atmospheric composition, adjusting the projectors to maximize dispersion. Outway fleet is changing course, Rico reported from the sensor console. They're heading directly for us. Weapon status, Laura asked. Active, but not targeting. It's almost like they're curious. Hours passed in nerve-wracking anticipation. The Outway fleet approached slowly, their massive vessels forming a ring around the asteroid field but making no hostile moves. Inside the makeshift bakery, the team worked in shifts, ensuring a continuous stream of fresh bread. I'm detecting unusual communications from the fleet, Rico said suddenly. Not standard tactical transmissions, something different, almost like music? Before Lara could respond, a direct communication request appeared on their system. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted. The view screen activated, revealing a being unlike any Lara had encountered. It appeared both mechanical and organic, with a chitinous exoskeleton interwoven with metallic components. Its multiple eyes swiveled independently, and when it spoke, the translation system struggled to keep pace with its complex harmonics. You make bread, the being said finally. Lara stepped forward. Yes, we do. Real bread, not simulation, not memory construct. Real bread, she confirmed, made by hand, with care and tradition. The being's exoskeleton shifted, plates realigning in what might have been agitation or excitement. We must verify. Lara glanced at her team, then made a decision that flew in the face of all military protocol. We invite you to share our bread, as equals, as potential friends. There was a long silence, during which Lara was acutely aware of the Outway fleet's overwhelming firepower surrounding their small vessel. Then, without warning, the alien commander disappeared from the screen. They've cut communication, Rico reported nervously. Weapons activation? Lara asked. No, but I'm detecting Colonel. They're launching something, small craft, heading directly for us. Lara made another split-second decision. No defensive measures, let them approach. The minutes that followed were among the most tense of her career. The small alien craft docked with their vessel, magnetic seals engaging with a solid thunk. After a series of mechanical sounds, the airlock cycled open. Standing there, unescorted and apparently unarmed, was the alien commander they had seen on the view screen. In person, it was both more imposing and somehow more vulnerable, its movements hesitant as it entered the bakery section. "I am Jarkoth," it said, its translator producing more fluid speech now. "Command Primary of the Outway Expansion." "Colonel Lara Min," she replied. "Border Systems Alliance." Jarkoth's sensory apparatus focused on the freshly baked loaves cooling on racks throughout the room. "You have created true bread." This was unexpected. Oren stepped forward, holding a simple round loaf still warm from the oven. With a gesture that bridged the vast gulf between their species, he broke the bread in half, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam, and offered one portion to the alien commander. What happened next would be debated by xenobiologists and cultural historians for generations. Jarkoth accepted the bread with appendages that trembled visibly. It brought the loaf to sensory organs near what might be considered its face, and then, using a previously concealed mouth-like structure, took a bite. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The commander's exoskeleton rippled with color changes, from metallic gray to vibrant blues and purples. A sound emerged that the translation system couldn't process, something between a song and a lament. "We remember," Jarkoth said finally, its voice modulated differently. "We were not always warriors. We were travelers, explorers, cultivators." Over the next several hours, as more representatives from the Outway fleet joined them and shared in the bread, a remarkable story emerged. The beings now known as the Outway fleet had once been a nomadic species of explorer scientists, traveling the stars in search of knowledge and exchange. Their civilization had been built around agriculture and food, particularly bread, which held cultural and spiritual significance. A catastrophic encounter with a hostile entity, something they referred to only as the forgetting, had damaged their collective memory, leaving only fragments of their true identity. Their advanced technology remained, but their cultural context was lost. Somehow, their ship's automated systems had interpreted this loss as a military directive, transforming a peaceful exploration fleet into an unstoppable armada. "The bread-making facilities," Jarkoth explained, "were maintained by autonomous systems that continued their functions even as we forgot their purpose. We knew they were important, but not why." "And the scent of fresh bread triggered memories," Dr. Quinn suggested. "A neurological connection that bypassed whatever blockage or damage had occurred." "Yes," the alien confirmed. "Your bread, made by hand, with living cultures. It carries resonances our mechanical systems could never reproduce. Each inhalation brings clarity. Each taste restores connection." As the extraordinary meeting continued, what had begun as a desperate last stand transformed into something unprecedented. A floating feast in space, where former enemies broke bread together and discovered common ground. Lara authorized more representatives from Horizon Gate to join them, including General Thaxon, who arrived skeptical but was quickly won over by the sincerity of the Outway leaders and the undeniable evidence of their transformation. "We have much to atone for," Jarkoth acknowledged. "Many worlds have suffered from our confusion and loss of identity. And we have much to learn from each other," Lara replied. "Your technology, combined with our cultural knowledge, could benefit all species in this sector." As the impromptu celebration continued, Lara found herself standing beside Jarkoth, watching Alliance personnel and Outway beings engage in animated conversations, united by the simple pleasure of good food. "In your culture," the alien commander asked, "does bread have special significance?" Lara considered the question. Throughout human history, bread has been central to civilization. It represents hospitality, community, sustenance. Breaking bread together is one of our oldest symbols of peace and friendship. "Then perhaps it is not coincidence that brought us together," Jarkoth suggested. "Perhaps some deeper pattern connects all sentient beings who cultivate and create, rather than simply consume." The weeks that followed were filled with intensive diplomacy, cultural exchange, and healing. The Bread Accord, as it came to be known, established not only peace between the Alliance and the Outway civilization, now calling themselves the Rememberers, but also a framework for cooperative development of culinary and agricultural technologies. Horizon Gate was transformed from a military outpost into a center for cross-species cultural exchange, with particular emphasis on food sciences. Chef Oren established the first interstellar culinary academy, where techniques and traditions from hundreds of worlds were documented and shared. Dr. Quinn led a team of xenobiologists and food scientists in studying the neurological effects of various cuisines, discovering that many species had deep connections to specific flavors and food preparation methods that transcended mere nutrition. And Lara Min, to her own surprise, found herself appointed as the Bread Ambassador, a diplomatic role that took her to worlds throughout the sector, using shared meals as the foundation for building trust and understanding between diverse civilizations. The transformation of the fearsome Outway fleet into the Rememberers marked the beginning of a new era for Galaxia's Edge, where military might had failed. The simple act of breaking bread together had succeeded, reminding everyone that beneath the differences of biology, technology, and culture, certain experiences united all sentient beings. On the first anniversary of the Bread Accord, a ceremony was held in the newly constructed Great Hall of Horizon Gate. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered to commemorate the day that war had given way to peace. At the center of the celebration was an enormous loaf of bread, crafted collaboratively by bakers from every member species of the expanded alliance. As Lara prepared to address the assembly, she caught sight of Rico, now promoted to captain and serving as liaison to the Rememberer fleet. Beside her stood Oren, proudly overseeing the culinary arrangements, and Dr. Quinn, deep in conversation with a group of Rememberer scientists. A year ago, Lara began when silence fell. We faced what we believed was our final hour. Our weapons failed, our defenses crumbled, and hope seemed lost. Yet here we stand, not as survivors of a catastrophe, but as architects of a new beginning. She gestured to the massive loaf at the center of the hall. This bread represents more than just a meal. It represents the power of shared experience, the recognition that across the vast gulfs of space and difference, we all seek nourishment, community, and meaning. Jarkoth stepped forward, its exoskeleton now permanently displaying the vibrant colors of full memory restoration. We came as conquerors, lost in the darkness of forgetting. You could have destroyed us, perhaps should have destroyed us. Instead, you offered bread. In doing so, you restored not just our memories, but our purpose. Together, they broke the ceremonial loaf, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam that filled the hall. As pieces were passed among the attendees, conversations flowed, barriers dissolved, and new connections formed. Looking out over the gathering, Lara reflected on how the universe worked in unexpected ways. Throughout her military career, she had prepared for war, studying weapons and tactics, hardening herself against fear and doubt. Never had she imagined that salvation would come not from superior firepower or clever strategy, but from something as humble and ancient as bread. Perhaps, she said quietly to Zarkoth, this is the true purpose of all our journeys through the stars, not conquest or even exploration, but the moment when we recognize ourselves in the other, when we share what sustains us, and in doing so, become more than we were. The alien commander's translator produced what might have been a chuckle. A philosopher as well as a warrior, Colonel Min, your species continues to surprise me. As does yours, she replied with a smile. Though I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that bread, something that requires patience, care, and transformation, would teach us all about becoming more than the sum of our parts. As the celebration continued around them, news arrived from the outer reaches of the sector. Other fragments of the once unified Rememberer civilization had been located, still trapped in the confusion of the forgetting. Plans were already forming for missions of contact and restoration, not with weapons, but with bread and other foods that might trigger the same awakening. Lara found herself volunteering to lead the first such mission. After a lifetime of preparing for war, the prospect of traveling the stars as an ambassador of peace, with loaves of bread as her most powerful tools, filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. That night, as Horizon Gate rotated slowly against the backdrop of stars, the kitchens remained active, filled with beings of all descriptions learning from one another, sharing recipes and stories. The aroma of baking bread drifted through the station's corridors, no longer a mysterious anomaly, but a promise of connection and understanding. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other civilizations waited, some friendly, some hostile, some simply unknown. But Lara Min, once the Alliance's foremost military strategist, now carried a different kind of weapon into the unknown. The knowledge that even the most fearsome enemies might be transformed by something as simple as the taste of homemade bread. The universe, it seemed, was full of hunger deeper than that of the stomach, a hunger for meaning, for memory, for connection. And as the inhabitants of Galaxia's Edge had discovered, sometimes the most profound revelations came not from the stars or advanced technology, but from the ancient wisdom baked into a humble loaf of bread.